4-run lead. The result drops them 2 games behind the last National League wildcard spot. The Mets and Diamondbacks are tied, both 83 and 68. The Padres are the wildcard leader of the National League. The Braves looking to snap a 3-game losing skid tonight when 6-7 Spencer Schwellenbach gets the nod. He'll take on 4-0 Jacob Junis. The Twins beat the Guardians 4-1. Will Castro hit a 2-run homer. The result keeps Minnesota locked into an American League wildcard spot. Lane Thomas homered for the AL Central leading Guardians, who can still clinch a playoff spot tonight. Elsewhere Tuesday, the Giants pounded the Orioles 10-0. The Mets scored a 10-1 win over the Nationals. In 10 innings, the Tigers beat the Royals 3-1. Bundle auto and home, renters or condo, and save with Progressive. That's the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders.
Imagine your team always looking and feeling their best in high-performance technical workwear. Cintas can make it happen. They have garments for almost every job imaginable. And with the Cintas Workwear program, you get freshly laundered garments delivered every week for everyone on your team. Great garments without the bother of laundry. That's a real perk for employees. Find out how Cintas can boost team image and morale. Visit Cintas.com.
Oh, I'm ready!
And get ready for the workday.
Our daughter Jessie loves playing detective.
But since we discovered she has sensitive skin, we've been playing detective too.
We thought the problem was our puppy.
But it was actually our old detergent. So we switched to Tide Free and Gentle.
Tide Free and Gentle has no dyes or perfumes, so it's gentle on her skin.
If it's got to be clean, it's got to be Tide Free and Gentle. This back-to-school season, Tide and Downy are giving back with $1.5 million in scholarships. Enter to win. No purchase necessary. US/TC 17+. End September 30th. Rules. Tide.com/scholarship/official rules.
No way football is playing in the fall and winter.
Because the hits don't hurt as much when you're numb. Get the lowdown on all the sports action coming up right here.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Scott Wetzel.
Off and running in today's edition of Football Full Circle right here on the SportsGrid Radio Network. Sirius Channel 159, Lisi and Wetzel taking you around the NFL for the next hour. Some news and notes surrounding the league. Kareem Hunt going to be back with the Kansas City Chiefs. He was there with the Browns and the Chiefs earlier in his career with the injury to Isaiah Pacheco. Scott, the Chiefs bring back Kareem Hunt to be coupled with Carson Steele, the rookie out of UCLA. So hopefully that could solidify the rushing attack for the Kansas City Chiefs. They do play the Atlanta Falcons and Kirk Cousins this coming weekend. Scott, also Pittsburgh going with Justin Fields in regards to their Week 3 matchup against the LA Chargers and Justin Herbert and Jim Harbaugh. This is the third week in a row. Steelers are 2-0. And I have to be honest with you, if Fields picks up this victory this coming weekend, I don't care how ugly it is. There's no way that Mike Tomlin could then turn to Russell Wilson.
Why not? What has Justin Fields done? Right away, we're less than a minute into the show. We're going to disagree. What has this guy done to deserve this starting job if he didn't win it in the preseason, which clearly he did not? You and I can quarterback the Pittsburgh Steelers to wins the way they're playing. That's just been their MO over the last 2 years. They're never going to beat any good team. Yeah, you could beat Denver and Atlanta. You know, and maybe even the Chargers, who knows, because that figures to be a low-scoring game. But you're not going to win against Cincinnati. You're not going to beat Baltimore playing this way. You need a quarterback that can actually throw the football.
I'm glad I brought this up because we come right out of the gate. You know, that's it. We're battling like a WWE.
Because Justin Fields stinks. Come
you
on.
You think he stinks? All right, so you think he sucks because of the statistics and obviously in his days
little
in
things
Chicago.
like that.
All right, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. How is Caleb Williams lighting it up with Eberflus in Chicago? Because he looks like a deer in the headlights. The offense looks actually much better with Justin Fields last year than they do this year. And I'll just say this. How much is the lack of explosive plays in the first couple of weeks all on Justin Fields, or how much of it is on Arthur Smith and the offensive game plan? 2 games they grinded it out. 2 games Justin Fields played within the scheme, got the victories on the road. If he gets win number 3, no matter how ugly it is, at least he's winning games. Isn't that what matters?
No. Listen, you want to win games, go get Mitch Trubisky. Go get Rudolph. Mason Rudolph. You can win games with those guys. They did with Mason Rudolph, but they realized they're not going to win on a big time level. What's the number one rule that coaches have, no matter what the sport? Don't ask players to do things they can't do. Against Denver, they threw the ball to the outside, or against Atlanta, they threw the ball. I don't know about this past week against Denver, but against Atlanta, they threw the ball to the outside every single play. They didn't have one pass down the field. Why? Because they realized that Justin Fields can't complete those passes. So they're keeping things real conservative, and we can all yell and scream about how he hasn't turned the ball over. Big stinking deal. I could quarterback and not turn the ball over if I'm not throwing the ball down the field, Joe. You're not going to beat good teams. They're not winning because of him. They're not losing because of him. So does that mean he deserves the starting job because he's not doing things that's going to make them lose?
Well, I will say this. He did throw and complete some passes to put his team in a position to score points. He hit Freiermuth on a big play. It was like a 2nd and 10, hit him for about a 30-yard pass. Did also target and had a couple of passes called back in regards to the penalties. So that affected his performance. But I got to be honest with you. Also got a huge PI call on Denver secondary by going deep. He was throwing darts down the field. He really was, if you watch the second half of that matchup. And I understand both games have been ugly, and he's been relying on that Steelers defense, right? I get that. But again, Scott, he's still winning. And we talk about Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson was on a home run last year. He had multiple games where he threw for under 200 yards. It wasn't like he was lighting it up either. I know the touchdown to interception ratio
was
looked
good.
Fantastic, but in regards to 300-yard performances, you didn't see that out of Russell Wilson last year.
No, but I don't think you're going to get that out of Justin Fields. So would the Steelers be 2-0 if Russell Wilson was the starting quarterback?
Probably not.
So. Oh,
I don't know.
Joe, they didn't even score a touchdown against Atlanta. They didn't score any touchdowns, and they won the game. You're telling me he wouldn't have accomplished at least that?
Let me ask you. He had 56 yards on the ground rushing. You think you're getting that type of productivity out of Russell Wilson on the ground?
That's not football, though. You know that, Joe.
Football, Scott.
He's got to get killed doing that. It's because
Scotty,
it's not. I don't want it to be.
Lamar,
I don't want it to be, so I'm saying it's not.
Caleb Williams, all these players that are taken in regards to the high draft picks, right? And success. Even Mahomes, when he has to tuck it, he can get those yards. They're mobile quarterbacks. You don't want a guy that's not going to run it, that's not going to be mobile. And Russell Wilson has shown that in the second half of his career. He's not willing to run the football as much as he was back in the days in regards to Seattle. I totally disagree. How can you tell the team after your backup quarterback is 3-0 that now we're going to turn over the reins to Russell Wilson that basically hasn't played it down yet in the regular season? And if they lose one or they lose two, there goes the season.
You know how you could do it? Because I think the players will do it, just like I think they did in Carolina with Bryce Young. I think they'll go to the head coach, Mike Tomlin, and say, listen, we're winning, but we're not winning because of this dude. We're seeing Russell Wilson in practice, and he's 10 times better than what Justin Fields is showing. And even though we're winning, that doesn't mean he's performing well. And I think those wide receivers will be in the room first, as they line up outside the door. Wide receivers first, running back second, and then the poor defensive players who keep on having to go out there because after every 3 and out, will be lined up number third. Oh, you can easily pull Justin Fields. And by the way, there has not been a team, Joe, not a mobile quarterback, but there has not been a team that has won a Super Bowl ever with strictly a running quarterback.
Okay, well, what about Trent Dilfer back in the day? He was lighting it up with the Baltimore Ravens.
Quarterback.
No, but
I'm talking about the Lamar Jacksons, the Fran Tarkentons of the world, the Randall Cunninghams of the world, the Justin Fields of the world, the Jalen Hurts of the world. Those guys don't win Super Bowls. Mobile quarterbacks like Pat Mahomes win Super Bowls, but not scrambling quarterbacks. You're never going to win at a big-time level with Justin Fields.
I disagree. I guess that's the argument of the week. We'll see how it plays out. Now, they're playing a hot team in regards to the LA Chargers. LA's been grinding games out with Justin Herbert, right? The rushing attack of J.K. Dobbins and that offensive line have really shown through in year number one. Get the victory over Bryce Young. Only time will tell, Scotty. I think if Justin Fields puts up a pretty good performance, again, 40, 50 yards on the ground, you could say 180 to 225 yards, and they get the victory over an AFC opponent, I think Tomlin will stick to him. That is the argument of the week, and we'll see how it plays out. Let's talk about Bryce Young, right? Because there's been a lot of negativity surrounding, his handling, and in regards to that, you have to put more on Dave Canales in regards to that. I did see a report that they entertained Cam Newton to come there again. I mean, if you're turning to Cam Newton to potentially come back in regards to that, that is absolutely atrocious. I think you roll it with Andy Dalton for a week or two, give the opportunity back to Bryce Young. If he can't perform in putting him back in the lineup, then I think you move on. You can't hang on to him the way the Giants hung on to Daniel Jones. I'm sorry, you just can't do it. It's an investment. You have to cut ties sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I was reading on Twitter that you take it for great assault. Like, supposedly the Giants were interested in Bryce Young. I don't think anybody is. I really don't. If you could only get a conditional 4th-round pick for Justin Fields, who, despite my displeasure for him, is a lot more accomplished than Bryce Young is, right? If you could only get a 4th-rounder, a conditional 4th-rounder for him, what realistically on the open market are you going to get for Bryce Young, right? I mean, but the problem is that, they only have him for 2 years. You're basically locked into this dude for 4 years unless you really just want to just throw everything out the window and say we got to start from scratch.
Well, that's the question, Scott. That is the main question for Bryce Young. Can he be an actual starter in this league? And Carolina needs to understand. I understand he's not grasping the scheme, but he needs to get it sooner rather than later. We'll come back, more Bryce Young talk.
Don't look like an idiot at work. Know your stuff. Football and everything else.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
An influx of salt water in the Mississippi River, which feeds southeastern Louisiana's drinking water supplies, is once again creeping up the waterway. For the third year in a row, an underwater levee is being built to slow the brackish intrusion and prevent it from reaching water intake treatment facilities. Salt water in southeast Louisiana has become a regular occurrence in recent years as the flow of the Mississippi has ebbed under dry conditions. Communities rely on the Mississippi's volume and current to push salt water from the Gulf of Mexico back out to sea. The federal government urged a U.S. District Court judge on Tuesday to temporarily block a proposed merger between Kroger and Albertsons. They say the combination would almost certainly benefit shareholders but not everyday shoppers. Lawyers for the Federal Trade Commission gave their closing arguments at the end of a 3-week hearing in Portland. The FTC wants U.S. District Judge Adrian Nelson to issue a preliminary injunction that would block the deal while its complaint goes before an in-house administrative law judge. I'm Trey Westerberg with the SportsGrid News Flash.
Whether you own a local business or a global one, you know that these days, generating growth is a challenge. By teaming with Bank of America, you'll not just stay ahead of the curve, you'll move it. With access to experts, award-winning insights, and business solutions so powerful, you'll make every move matter, locally and globally. Visit bankofamerica.com/banking for business to learn more. What would you like the power to do? Copyright 2024 Bank of America N.A.
I can't wait for golf this weekend, huh, buddy? Time flies. Love you, man. Oh, don't forget your knee brace again. We aren't in college anymore.
Moments together matter, so help protect yourself from RSV. If you're 75 or older or 60 plus with a chronic condition like asthma, COPD, heart disease, or severe diabetes, you're at higher risk of landing in the hospital from RSV, and there are no prescription RSV treatments. Check eligibility and schedule your RSV vaccine at vaxassist.com. Sponsored by Pfizer.
Fall is almost here.
It's time to stow the lawnmower and get ready for all that glorious action coming your way. Stay tuned to SportsGrid for all the strategies, angles, and info you need to get the winning edge. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Scott Wetzel.
Continuing the conversation, Scott and I left off talking about the development of Bryce Young in Carolina. He's going to sit. Andy Dalton will get the start this coming weekend, and we'll see how long that lasts. Does Bryce Young have a position to potentially start in this league? That is the question that will kick around, Scott. I actually believe that, part of his development was sort of curtailed last year with Frank Reich, right? I thought Frank Reich was a terrible coach in the regard that he wanted to force the square peg into the round hole. It was his offensive philosophy. and it had to be his way or no way. If you watch Bryce Young back in college, he played a majority of the snaps in regards to the shotgun. They spread it 5 wide and obviously give him open looks to potentially make those type of reads. They never did that in Arizona in regards to that offense. They wanted him under center. They wanted to utilize the rushing attack, more of a methodical, short to intermediate passing game. And they don't really have weapons, right? I mean, Adam Thielen is good. I mean, Leggett is good. We'll see, the rookie out of South Carolina. But there's no pure number one in regards to a speedster or Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, A.J. Brown in that lineup. So, I mean, aren't we expecting more from Bryce Young based off of last year in regards to just that from a statistical sense?
Well, I mean, you can't get any worse than what he got last year, right? And if you look at his numbers, I mean, his numbers were just as bad, if not worse, after they fired Frank Reich, outside of one game against the Packers. Otherwise, he was atrocious. Yeah. That's why I thought, Joe, that they may have reached out. Maybe they did, and they just, decided on Canales. But I thought Bill O'Brien would have been the guy, his offensive coordinator in Alabama. Let's go get the guy that he had the most success with. He's had, success in the NFL with the Houston Texans and Penn State and everywhere else. That's where I kind of thought they would go if they were completely sold in on Bryce Young. But, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. I get it. You can't write off the entire season 2 weeks in. I get that. But what are they really accomplishing, Joe, by starting Andy Dalton, right? Let's say they win. The best case scenario, they win 5, 6, 7, 8 games maybe. You're not going to rely on Andy Dalton next year. So what does that mean with Bryce Young? He's at the bench. So now you're not going to be in a top 5 or even top 10 pick and draft-wise if you want to reload. So, I mean, but I get it. You just can't continue to put him out there.
I actually give credit to Dave Canales because he is a rookie coach, right? Young coach. And you're right in regards to that offensive mind. I actually thought it was a good fit for Bryce Young in regards to that, the way he mentored Baker Mayfield and the way he coached him up. Baker Mayfield, again, I keep saying it was one of the most productive quarterbacks in the NFL over the last 8 or 9 games of the regular season, averaged around 270 passing yards per game. I thought Canales would at least bring out the best in Bryce Young. But from what I've seen, Scott, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 55% completion percentage. You look at the average yards per pass completion, less than 5 yards. I mean, everything is a bubble screen or a short to intermediate pass. You can't have that in the NFL, right? So I actually think it's good if their plan is put in Andy Dalton for a game or 2 at the most, and then put him back in to where maybe he has that confidence and he can break down film where he can see what he's doing wrong or maybe where his own weaknesses are, and then implement him back in that lineup. If he still fails after that, then you cut him. Then the plan has got to be, we can't win with this guy. Let's ship him off and let's see who will take him off of our hands for, a 4 or 5 in regards to a draft pick.
Right. Well, what happens if they win? Right? I don't know who they play next week, but they can beat the Raiders,
not going
right?
Anywhere. Yeah, but
no, but I'll throw you the same thing you threw at me with Pittsburgh. How do you pull Andy Dalton? That they go 2-0 the next 2 games, and I got to look and see who they play next week.
Okay.
How do you pull him after going 2-0 and then 0-2? You can't. You can't possibly do that. I honestly believe the players are the ones that orchestrated this.
All right, good point, but I'll tell you the difference. Pittsburgh made it to a Super Bowl, a playoff game last year against Buffalo, right? They went with Trubisky. They then went with Mason Rudolph, the 3rd string, still got to the playoffs and actually played okay in regards to that game against Buffalo. They didn't get completely blown out in that regard. They were somewhat competitive. So the hope is, right, you get that quarterback, you get the mobility in regards to Justin Fields. If he can elevate you, he gives you the best opportunity to potentially win a playoff game and obviously make it to an AFC championship, especially if the defense plays as good as they've been in regards to the first 2 games, right? The difference with Carolina is exactly what I mentioned. After last year with Frank Reich, that terrible roster that they have as well. Now, I like Xavier Leggett, but he's got to prove it, obviously, in regards to the football field. Adam Thielen, at the end of his career, he could put up numbers, but in my opinion, a possession type of guy. Who else do they have around? They don't have a rushing attack. They have Miles Sanders that looks like he looks like he's 100 years old as it relates to the running back situation. So if Andy Dalton comes in and wins 5 or 6 games, you're still stuck in neutral because the roster as a whole is nowhere near the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Well, I know that, but how do you pull the guy? All right, they got Cincinnati next week, so they probably won't win that. But let's say they beat the Raiders this week,
Right.
and they're competitive against Cincinnati. They put some points on the board. You can't pull them. You just can't. And their bye week isn't until like week 10 or 11, so you got a long ways to go before that's going to come up. I get it, though. You put them in there. Let Dalton, maybe I'm going to put him in there a little bit longer than you are. Put him in there for 4 or 5 games. Maybe you get some success, but they're not going to be a playoff team regardless, right? So then you put Bryce Young back in there for the final, 5, 6, 7 weeks, and then you make your decision if he hasn't gotten any better by then. How you're a big college guy, Joe. How could he be this bad? If he was that good in Alabama, how could it possibly be this bad? That he doesn't even look like an NFL player.
Talent. And he I got to be honest, he does not look like the same confident quarterback. The one thing that I was most impressed about, and I was wrong on Bryce Young, I actually thought he would be a pretty good, NFL quarterback, is that the body language. I never saw Bryce Young phased in a big moment at Alabama. Now, granted, they have 5 stars around them, but he would stay in the pocket. He would look down the receivers. He would step in, take hard shots, and still make throws, lead his team from behind, put his team in a position to win games, especially when you look at that Tennessee game on the road in a tough environment where they lost by 7 in overtime. I just thought he had it. He looks completely confused. He looks like a quarterback that is not confident, doesn't know the scheme, and unfortunately looks like a high school quarterback as opposed to an NFL guy. We'll see. Only time will tell, Scott. We'll come back with more quarterback conversation.
There's smart.
And there's not smart.
Not smart is hope as a strategy. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Keep it here.
And win. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. The SportsGrid Radio Network presents This Date in Sports History.
Unitas again is going to go to the air.
1966, Baltimore Colts quarterback Johnny Unitas throws 4 touchdown passes in a 38-23 win over the Vikings to surpass Y.A. Tittle as the NFL's career leader with 212 touchdowns. Unitas finished his career with 290 touchdown passes and over 40,000 yards. For SportsGrid Radio, I'm Mike DeMurgis.
The Technology Minute with George Capalbo.
Purdue University physicists have opened the world's first quantum disco with the world's tiniest disco ball. And by tiny, I mean a disco ball 1/100th the width of a human hair, made of glowing fluorescent nanodiamonds levitating inside a pure vacuum, spinning 1.2 billion times per minute. The point? Not to improve your platform shoe disco finger, but to simulate what happens to qubits inside a quantum computer. Computing power that could be 150 billion times faster than yesterday's supercomputer. And that's a lot cooler than John Travolta doing the funky chicken. Follow me at Chicapalbo on X and stay tuned to the Technology Minute for more cool stuff like this.
Money line.
The New Orleans Saints putting forward a performance that if we did an AP poll in the NFL would probably beg the question, how are they not number 1 in the country? 15 drives for Derek Carr, 15 scoring possessions for the New Orleans Saints. The early returns are the Saints are the best team in football.
Catch Money Line with Donnie Rightside and Kevin Walsh. Weekdays, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 Pacific on the SportsGrid Radio Network. Wherever you go,
there you are.
Download the SportsGrid mobile app and we'll be right there with you.
So now you can get the winning edge
anywhere, even while the wife's talking to you.
if you've got an earbud.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Scott Wetzel.
All right, Scott and I are back talking about Bryce Young, and then where could he go from here? Where do the Carolina Panthers turn in regards to their Week 3 and Week 4 matchups with Andy Dalton? Are they a contender for potentially maybe a wild card? Would you bet them right now as a long shot? If you like, I know you say I got your attention. You would take a shot. Okay.
I would. You know what? How about 75-1 to win the division, Joe? Let's just play.
Scott.
Well, listen, is Atlanta any good? No. Are the Saints really, and I like the Saints, are they really any good? No. Tampa Bay's winning the division going 8-9, 9-8, right? So let's just play devil's advocate. Andy Dalton goes in there, breath of fresh air. They beat the Raiders. Then they come back home and they got to face Cincinnati. All right, a daunting task. But who did Andy Dalton grow up with? Cincinnati Bengals. Little extra chip on his shoulder. So now all of a sudden they pull up the upset. Joey B gets hurt. Now they're 2-2 and they're on a roll. It's at 75 to win that division. I'll take a crack at that.
I knew that I would get you it was like the old banjo minnow with the hook. We got your hook, line, and sinker. Right. I knew that I would pose that question, and you would jump at the bait in regards to there's no.
Because here's why, Joe. Here's why. Because when you're going from zero, right, and you are going from absolute zero with Bryce Young, forget about whether he'll turn out to be something. He's been zero. Anyone is an improvement. So now you're going to Andy Dalton, who may be a 6. Any kind of luck is a 7. But that's a big jump from 0 to 7. That makes that a competitive team. They should be able to at least cover the spread, which is one. They only did it one time last year on the road. They lost all their games. They only cover. That makes them that much more better. Whether it takes them from just an atrocious team to a lousy team, who knows? But it does elevate them to a team that I think should be able to compete.
Well, I'll just say this. The team that I think will compete in next week's matchup is the Las Vegas Raiders. I like Gardner Minshew. You see the emergence of Brock Bowers with 98 receiving yards.
Yeah.
I actually bet the Raiders at plus 320 to make the playoffs. People were selling them. I think there's multiple weapons there. The fact that they lost Josh Jacobs, to me, doesn't matter. I believe in Antonio Pierce, Scuddy type of team. They get the win, the outright win as an 8.5-point dog against Baltimore. I think they're absolutely going to abuse Andy Dalton in regards to that front seven. I think Max Crosby will get there early and often. This is one game I would lay the 5.5. It's similar to the Cincy game. I get that. And obviously now you're right, from 0 to potentially now to have a hint of a passing attack, but I just don't see it, Scott. I think Las Vegas absolutely wins this ball game, hands down, and they win it by double digits. I do want to ask you about another quarterback. How about Tennessee and Will Levis? What do they do with him? Because I said it before and I'll say it again. He was never worthy of a first-round pick. He was the first selection taken in the second round, or second selection in the second round by the Titans. People said, this is the guy. He showed some glimpses with the performance against Miami last year, but his coach doesn't like him. He's another one that looks like a deer in the headlights and is coughed up not 1, but 2 wins right now by this team. What do they do if they lose this week to Green Bay?
Yeah, well, and who are they facing, too? Malik Willis is the other, Right. Between the Jets and the Tennessee Titans, has there been 2 teams that have drafted worse quarterbacks over the last 5 years than those 2 franchises?
No, but again,
Willis
Sam
stumped too.
has success, so maybe the Jets just didn't put the right coaches around them, because Sam Darnold looks all right.
Yeah, he didn't look all right in Carolina. He's been in the league a few years, so he's had a chance to sit there and learn. But listen, I'll say this. Also, by the way, if I'm the special teams coach for Tennessee, I wouldn't be buying any houses anytime soon, because the loss to the shuffle is not 1 but 2 punts blocked. Yeah. I mean, how has that happened in back-to-back weeks, right?
I totally agree. At least I said it too. He stinks.
Yeah. At least the kid, though, was trying to make a play. Both interceptions the last week against the Bears and then this past week, if you saw the play that he fumbled the ball that the head coach was so upset about, he was in a process of being sacked and he tried to lateral the ball to a running back and obviously it didn't work out well. But at least he's trying, but he stinks. He shouldn't have been, in that position. I don't know what happened against our Dolphins. I mean, Bryce Young against the Packers last year and Levis against the Dolphins last year. Those are the 2 performances that are going to give those players little outliers, just like just maybe, but in reality, and that's not a bad little team. Like, I like what they did Tennessee in the offseason, but I don't think it's happening against with Will Levis.
And Malik Willis going up against his former team. We'll see if he can lead the victory this coming weekend. They're actually 2.5-point dogs on the road. We'll see how it plays out. When we come back, more NFC talk right here on Football Full Circle.
The winning edge.
You've got it.
But not everybody has it, because not everybody listens to us.
But we're working on that.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
Progressive presents the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders. Falcons coach Raheem Morris said Monday night's win over the Eagles was a huge morale booster.
For me, I'm never going to ride that emotional roller coaster, right? Every game you go out there and it's a process, right? You play the game, you go out there and try to win, try to give it your best efforts, and you got to be able to deal with those reality of those results.
The Rams are banged up with Cooper Kupp headed to the IR. Head coach Sean McVay on the rash of injuries.
3 guys have injuries that they'll be out for a good amount of time. Cooper Kupp with his ankle, Jonah Jackson re-aggravated his shoulder, and John Johnson got his shoulder as well. And then, a little mild groin where we'll kind of keep him out for the next couple days, but he should be good for the game with Josh Carty. But those 3 guys will be all out for an extended period of time.
Bundle auto and home, renters or condo, and save with Progressive. That's the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders.
I can't wait for golf this weekend, huh, buddy? Time flies. Love you, man. Oh, don't forget your knee brace again. We aren't in college anymore.
Moments together matter, so help protect yourself from RSV. If you're 75 or older or 60 plus with a chronic condition like asthma, COPD, heart disease, or severe diabetes, you're at higher risk of landing in the hospital from RSV, and there are no prescription RSV treatments. Check eligibility and schedule your RSV vaccine at vaxassist.com. Sponsored by Pfizer.
Febreze. So my home is also my office, and before I can focus, every room's gotta be clean. That means tidying up, then spraying my Febreze Air Mist. Ooh, that's fresh. Febreze Air Mist scents are all high quality. They fight any weird funk, and they give my air an instant boost of freshness. So not only does my home smell good, I feel good too. After I Febreze, it's time to start my day.
Breathe happy, Febreze, la 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 la.
Days are getting cooler.
The shadows are getting longer. You know what that means?
It's football weather. So bundle up and keep it here for all the latest strategies and gridiron information.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Scott Wetzel.
Back on Football Full Circle, Lisi and Wetzel breaking it down. We just left off talking about Malik Willis and Will Levis that'll square off this coming Sunday in Nashville, Tennessee. A 2.5-point favorite on FanDuel. Under and over is 36.5. I just don't see any way. I can't back an over right now in regards to both of these quarterbacks. Scott, what are you going to get? I mean, I think, honestly, Green Bay continues to pound the rock with Josh Jacobs. I think they can ground it out. I probably would take the 2.5 points with the Packers. I don't love it. If this got under 30 from an in-game perspective, I would definitely jump in from that total, but I can't take it pre-kick at 36.5. There's no way.
Yeah. Kind of like New England and the Jets Thursday. I'm surprised that line hasn't dropped 38.5. I mean, I don't think that's going to be a high-scoring game either. But yeah, I mean, listen, they got the win. Green Bay, give them all the credit in the world, but it's not like Malik Willis was throwing the football all over the place. He stinks too, right? I mean, I don't think there's going to be a worse quarterback duo this week than what we're going to have in that football game. Little mental edge. Who do you give it to? Do you give it to Levis to Willis going back home, or do you give it to Tennessee because they know his tendencies, they know what he can do, can't do? I tend to give it to the player just because I think that mental edge, but he stinks. Either way, that's got 10-7 written all over it.
Yeah, I actually think LaFleur is a really good head coach and doesn't get enough credit because of Aaron Rodgers in that discussion. But again, from a game plan perspective, he has the right game plan almost each and every game, right? I mean, look at that performance against Dallas in the playoff situation. They were prepared against San Francisco, should have won that game, couldn't pull it out in regards to the playoff loss. They were prepared week 1 from an offensive perspective, attacking that Philadelphia defense, right? And then everybody expected them to fall off a cliff playing the Colts. And he found a way to at least give Malik Willis an opportunity to throw his first touchdown pass. I mean, it's amazing. The guy's he's in the league 3 years, has 1 touchdown pass that came there last week. Here's the thing. I have no confidence in Levis. I have no confidence in regards to Callahan and that offensive staff. And again, I just don't think the playmakers are there for Tennessee. everybody's pumping up Ridley and Hopkins. I didn't see it last week when the game was on the line. It was more Will Levis making plays with his legs than it was in the passing attack, right? Tajay Spears, Tony Pollard aren't really scaring you as it relates to the rushing attack. So give me Green Bay in regards to that. But you did want to bring up the situation in Miami, right? And I asked you in terms of the break, would Miami take a flyer on Bryce Young? Would McDaniel be like, you know what, maybe I could take or get the most out of him in regards to, cultivating his talent if you're ever going to get it. If Miami could get Young on the cheap, you think that's an option for the Dolphins long term? Because right now they have Skylar Thompson and Snoop Huntley on the roster.
Yeah, I just as soon as we discussed, go get Ryan Tannehill. He's still out there. He's got the Dolphin ties, not with this regime, not with this head coach anyway, but
Scotty.
still,
yeah,
he's got more than Bryce Young. I don't want to give up anything for Bryce Young. We've already been down that road. A miniature Alabama quarterback, right? They can't throw the ball, down the middle of the field. So we got that with Tua. If there was a bet on FanDuel and the like, 50-50. Will Tua play again this year? Where would you go?
I don't
think he's going to.
I think again, I can't speak for Tua, but I still think he has a desire to play. So I would take that bet to the yes, but I think it's more after week 10 in regards to that. I don't think he's coming back anytime soon. The bigger question, okay, because obviously being both Dolphin fans, do you think they're just a quarterback situation in regards to getting to the playoffs? And let's think of this realistically. They can get to the playoffs. We know they have the talent from an offensive perspective. But the biggest concern, Scott, they gave up 122 rushing yards to Jacksonville week 1. They gave up 240 to Buffalo, James Cook and Josh Allen. How are you confident that no matter who, you could put Marino back at quarterback? They're not stopping anybody, and most likely they're going to lose this week to old man Geno Smith.
Yeah, if they lose to Seattle, I think that number is way inflated. Skylar Thompson's not too bad. He looked awful last Thursday against Buffalo when he was thrown in there for whatever reason. But the games he played a couple of years ago, including that playoff game against Buffalo, he actually looked halfway decent. We'll see. I think they're going to be more competitive than what most people think.
You
think
they can win that
What are they going to do?
Could they win that game as a 4.5-point dog? Plus 188 on the money. Here's the thing. Do you think last week, when they lost to Buffalo on Thursday night, was that more just because they got blown out of the water, that there was no game plan for Waddle, there was no game plan for Tyreek Hill, that Geno Smith came out of, they resurrected Geno Smith from the grave in regards to making him the number one option? How do you go into that game plan that Geno Smith is your main weapon?
Yeah, it's amazing. And when Tua, went down, Joe, they quit. I mean, you talk about a team that is so poorly coached. I don't think there's a head coach out there. They get so much praise as Boy Wonder Jr., as I like to call him, and it just doesn't have his team prepared to play on these primetime games or against good teams. It's amazing. The numbers are just outstanding. They're so bad. It's unbelievable. Yet the media just loves this guy. All this perception about how they run this great offense and everything. Right. I don't see it, and they gave him a contract extension. They gave Tua a contract extension. They restructured Hill, so he's got a contract extension.
Right.
So
I agree with you, Scott. I have said he's a great offensive mind. I'm not taking away from his ability to game plan and get weapons in regards to Tyreek and put up numbers. I'm not denying that in any capacity. What I am fighting with in regards to Mike McDaniel, and you could tell me if I'm wrong, is that he has an offensive and a philosophy going in regards to a certain game plan. When that doesn't work from an in-game perspective, he is a horrible game time adjuster, meaning he doesn't make halftime adjustments. Either the game plan is working from the start of kickoff or it's not. When they fall behind and they get kicked in the chops the way they did last week, he doesn't know how to adjust, and that's why I think he's a terrible head coach. We might have lost Scotty there in regards to the feed. He'll be back in regards to talking about the Miami Dolphins. And I have said it. That is the biggest thing for me when we look at, Mike McDaniel being an elite head coach, is that he does not make second half adjustments. And Scotty, am I wrong about that? Either the game plan works or the game plan doesn't. at halftime, he doesn't have the ingenuity to say, okay, this is the weakness now moving forward in the second half, and we'll exploit it that way. It's always got to be whatever the pregame game plan is, he sticks to that.
Yeah, even the game against Buffalo, they were down 3 touchdowns. Okay, but they had the ball first and goal. They score a touchdown there. All of a sudden, it's a 2-score game, and you're still in the game. But just completely deflated with Tua, and he doesn't get his guys to play better than what they should play. Another mark of a good head coach, right?
Right. I agree.
That's why they still bad teams, but does he get his guys up?
Yeah. No, you're right, Scott. I agree. I totally agree in regards to that, and we'll see exactly, what transpires in regards to the matchup this weekend against the Seattle Seahawks. Right now on FanDuel, 4.5 in favor of Geno Smith. Hot quarterback in Geno Smith, 323 last week, hit DK Metcalf with multiple passes and the big touchdown over New England secondary. A quarterback that doesn't get enough credit, Scott, Baker Mayfield. I talked about it in regards to this show, that at 26-1, they were not going to be there in regards to an NFC championship. They get the victory as a 7.5-point dog. Is this a contender in the NFC?
That's got to be, right? They reached the second round last year, one drive away from really going to the NFC Championship game late in the game, and they got basically everybody back. They don't want to give them any respect, but I would think so, now that we've seen some flaws in San Francisco and Philadelphia for sure, and Dallas.
Baker Mayfield making some way there in Tampa, 2-0 at the start of the division and at the top. We'll come back. We'll talk more contenders in the NFL right here on Football Full Circle. Keep it where it is.
Yeah, it's getting cooler.
Football weather is here.
Stay tuned for all the latest odds, strategies, and info. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
An influx of salt water in the Mississippi River, which feeds southeastern Louisiana's drinking water supplies, is once again creeping up the waterway. For the third year in a row, an underwater levee is being built to slow the brackish intrusion and prevent it from reaching water intake treatment facilities. Salt water in southeast Louisiana has become a regular occurrence in recent years as the flow of the Mississippi has ebbed under dry conditions. Communities rely on the Mississippi's volume and current to push salt water from the Gulf of Mexico back out to sea. The federal government urged a U.S. District Court judge on Tuesday to temporarily block a proposed merger between Kroger and Albertsons. They say the combination would almost certainly benefit shareholders but not everyday shoppers. Lawyers for the Federal Trade Commission gave their closing arguments at the end of a 3-week hearing in Portland. The FTC wants U.S. District Judge Adrian Nelson to issue a preliminary injunction that would block the deal while its complaint goes before an in-house administrative law judge. I'm Trey Westerberg with the SportsGrid News Flash.
Every business faces challenges, but complicated, expensive, and uncertain shipping shouldn't be one of them.
With USPS Ground Advantage from the United States Postal Service, you can avoid all the noise.
No more unexpected surcharges, hidden fees, or complex rate structures.
It's just easy, cost-effective, and dependable shipping. Tune your business's frequency to success and turn shipping to your advantage. Learn how at USPS.com/advantage. USPS Ground Advantage. Simple, affordable, reliable.
Total Wireless is made to totally keep up with you. We now have unlimited data that never slows you down, covered by the Verizon 5G network, and all for less than $30 a month when you get 4 lines. And the best part, we give you a free Samsung Galaxy A54 5G when you switch to the Total 5G Plus Unlimited plan. Visit your local Total Wireless store today. Total Wireless, we're totally with you. Actual speeds may vary by location. For data management practices, see TotalWireless.com.
Ask any player and they'll tell you any advantage is important.
That's where we come in.
SportsGrid delivers gaming strategies and analysis 7 days a week.
The winning edge.
It's your advantage to more winning
more often.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Scott Wetzel.
Back on Football Full Circle, Lisi and Wetzel breaking down week number 3 in the NFL. A lot of news and notes to get to. We're talking about multiple quarterback situations around the AFC and NFC, respectively. Scott, I do want to bring up Brian Daboll and the New York Giants, right? They were underdogs last week, 1.5 points on the road to face off against rookie Jaden Daniels. We understand the situation with Graham Gano and the kicker. I have to be honest with you. I know Daniel Jones stepped up, but they lose the game again. They're 0-2. A lot of people calling for Brian Daboll's job in New York. This team has no identity. Big picture, number one, we know Daniel Jones isn't the answer. But is Brian Daboll safe in regards to this season? Does he get a pass? And do you give the opportunity with a new quarterback and maybe Brian Daboll in year number 4?
Well, it's a good question. Does the GM get a pass? Because for the first 3.5 quarters, we kept on reflecting back on Hard Knocks with the owner, Wellington Maris, saying, Saquon Barkley better not go to any other team except Philadelphia, right? And
Right.
where does he end up in Philadelphia? And he plays great for 3.5 quarters, then we see in the end. So they could blow the whole thing up, Joe. I would think, I'm going to say yes, but don't forget, now they didn't draft Danny Nichols, as I like to call him, but they did decide to give him a contract extension. So he is on, their resume, if you will. But they've gone through so many head coaches over the last, 5, 6, 7 years, Joe Judge, the whole slew of the rank. I mean, you got to stick with one guy. So I got a feeling he'll get another crack. I got a feeling GM, Dable, and company, they'll all get another crack at this thing and go get their guy, if you will. So I'm going to say no, but this has got disaster written all over it.
It does. Now, I guess here's the biggest thing when you look at Dable, right? And I've said this from the get-go. Year one, they were better off being 4-13, never making the playoffs, never really getting that win over Minnesota, because, again, it's New York. If it was Green Bay, if it was Indy, if it was any other, small market team, the expectation wouldn't be as high as in New York. You have to go big or go home in terms of New York, right? So they were better off stripping it down in year number one and saying, this isn't the answer in terms of Daniel Jones. We'll play him out this year. We're not going to try and win games, or meaning you try and win games, but my point is you try to develop the talent, the young talent that you do have on the roster. If you win games, great. If you don't, there's no big, rush because it's a first-year head coach. He did the opposite. He coached the team up. They win over 7 games. They win a playoff game. And everybody in New York says, this is our guy. This is it. The second coming of Bill Parcells. He knew he didn't have the talent. Now, I will say this. If that decision, when he first took the job, was more Maris and the organization saying, you need to play this guy and you have to get the most out of him, then I give Brian Daboll a pass. But if that was his decision, to say, you know what, I'm going to try and win as many games as possible, he put himself at a disadvantage. And I'll say this, last week, he coached that game in the final 5 minutes like he had the kicker and Washington didn't have the kicker. I couldn't believe how he coached in the final 5 minutes of that loss last week.
Yeah. Not only did they get the playoffs, Joe, it was the repercussions of that. If they go 5 and 12, then they don't re-sign Danny Nichols. Then they just move on. But because they didn't pick up, they weren't smart enough to pick up the last year of his contract. He does great his 4th year. Now they're stuck and they have to give him a 4-year deal, albeit only 2 guaranteed. But you're going to be living in purgatory for the next 2 years, and this is the 2nd year. So yeah, I'm not thrilled with Daboll's coaching. Some of his strategies and different things like that. I mean, I don't know how if you got a field goal kicker who is banged up. Right, but okay, he's healthy enough to play, but still, don't you have something prepared just in case he does get hurt? Isn't there one guy on that roster, at a 50-plus players, you tell me you can't keep a backup kicker? You can't find one backup defensive lineman, one backup offensive lineman or whatever that's not going to be on the roster this week?
Yeah,
that should be
agree.
identical.
And Scott, the play calling, what I mean by that is they get inside the 30. You have no kicker. Right? It's not like you're kicking a field goal inside the 30, right? So he's utilizing the rushing attack. All he was concerned about was milking the clock as opposed to being aggressive and scoring a touchdown. Your offense was the one that scored 2 touchdowns in the game, not Jaden Daniels, right? So in that situation, when you're not going to kick a game-winning field goal in regards to the final 5 minutes, why are you running Singletary on 2nd and 3rd down and then setting up a 4th and 4 in terms of that situation when you know that if you don't get it, now you're giving Jaden Daniels the ball back and it's an even game. There's no pressure on Jaden Daniels in that type of situation, right? I mean, he's playing in an even game in the final 2 minutes. If he doesn't get there, they go to overtime. It was pathetic. I'll say this. Do you like them this week plus the 6.5 on the road against Cleveland? I actually do.
Yeah, it's a big number, right? Until we see something out of the Deshaun Watson, even victory this past week, he wasn't exactly great. So,
can we get over that 38.5, Scotty?
I had over 41.5 against Jacksonville just because I figured both teams would bounce back. Right. So I'm I got a little burnt feeling with Cleveland there. They generally do play better at home defensively, although don't tell that to the Dallas Cowgirls, right? So here's a little quirk for you, though. We've already had 2 teams win football games without scoring a touchdown over teams that did score touchdowns. Pittsburgh in week 1 against Atlanta and now Washington against the Giants. I mean, that's got to set the record for most winning teams without a touchdown, winning football games. Yeah, but I would kind of lean towards the under. I would lean towards the under in that game.
See, I like the over just because, again, now the season's at a crossroads for Brian Daboll, right? That was a winner. Think about Daniel Jones' career against Washington, right? The Giants have owned Washington in recent years. Yeah. So to lose that game, that had to be on the record of saying we got to come out of there at least 1-1. Now with this matchup, I think he throws caution to the wind. They lose this game, they're going to be calling for Brian Daboll's job in New York. You just know how it is. They need a better showing in regards to that.
Yeah, they have to at least look better offensively. That's for sure. So, got a lot of weird games this week, Joe. Where it's a lot of like, is Baltimore going to be 0-3? Is Dallas going to be 1-2? Is San Fran going to be 1-2? Are the Rams going to be 0-3?
Another big thing, and we'll talk about it, Indianapolis and the Bears, Williams and Richardson. We'll talk about that next.
The boys of summer become the champions of fall.
The World Series is on its way.
And SportsGrid brings you every angle. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. SportsGrid TV and radio networks are the premier streaming video and audio channels dedicated to serving the sports wagering audience. Found on major smart TV platforms and streaming on SportsGrid Radio and SiriusXM Channel 159. SportsGrid's real-time data, expert commentary, and entertaining analysis transform viewers into informed sports enthusiasts. Our weekday radio lineup begins with the early line at 8 a.m. Eastern with Ben Stevens and Donnie Rightside. Donnie joins Kevin Walsh on Money Line at 11 a.m. Eastern, followed by Football Full Circle at noon Eastern. Kaplan and crew join the party at 1 p.m. Eastern, and Pharrell Coast to Coast keeps things rolling from 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern. Get in the mix with Kevin Walsh and Game Time Decisions at 6 p.m. Eastern. Evenings simmer with Carver and Lisi, then boils over with Gabe Moritzi on Sports Rage Late Night at 10 p.m. Eastern. To find out where to find SportsGrid that's best for you, go to sportsgrid.com. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
How would you like to get high-speed internet for your home for less than $2 a day? That's right. For about $50 a month, you'll get lightning-fast internet. Are you paying less than $50 a month right now for your internet? Then call Whole Home Connect right now for blazing fast internet at $50 a month with no price increases, no hidden fees, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees. It's a great deal. And guess what? You can try it for 15 days. If you don't like it, you get your money back. But you're gonna love it, and you're gonna love the price. Internet for your home for $50 a month. That's less than $2 a day. Plus, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees, and our 15-day guarantee. Call now. 800-797-1292. 800-797-1292. 800-797-1292. That's 800-797-1292.
Think of us as your cool roommate that has this innate gift of somehow always picking winners and never bugs you about doing the dishes or paying rent. Sports gaming strategies and information 24/7.
Get the winning edge.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Scott Wetzel.
All right, rounding out today's show. An hour flies by when Scott and I are talking NFL and college football. We left off talking about the potential matchup this coming weekend between Anthony Richardson and the Chicago Bears with their starting quarterback, Caleb Williams. Scott, did you watch that Sunday night game against C.J. Stroud? Did you see the post-game interview in regards where Stroud went over, tried to give Caleb Williams some advice. He didn't seem like he wanted that in any capacity. I will say this, 2 showings now with Chicago's offense. He clearly looks like a raw quarterback. He looks like a rookie. I will say I think Jaden Daniels looks more polished, more confident in the offensive scheme than Caleb Williams. If they lose this game and Caleb, let's say, throws again for under 150 yards, this is the same situation like Justin Fields had in Chicago. So I'll throw it back to you. Is this more on Eberflus? Because I continue to believe that it's his footprint and how he wants to play games, or is it just more in regards to Caleb just maybe not being NFL ready in week number 3?
Yeah, maybe it's a combination of both, and you could couple that parlay if you want with Justin Fields in Pittsburgh. You know, if Pittsburgh beats the Chargers and goes to 3-0, now the Bears wouldn't be 0-3 because they did win against Tennessee, but it's not because of Caleb Williams, right? The special teams touchdown, defensive touchdown. That would really start. I don't think they would be willing to throw Caleb out the window, but I think the fans would be getting on Eberflus. Absolutely. I mean, he's not looked good. He threw for 94 yards in week number 1. They were able to win thanks to the defense and special teams. He looked lost, albeit he was getting killed. The offensive line did him no favors Sunday night. So I'll give him a little bit of a break there. But that's been his MO, right? Had this little bit of an attitude, once part ownership of a team, if he's being drafted, all these goofy stories, his father. I did see them interact, CJ. I didn't really notice anything bad, but if that's what people are saying.
No, he was trying to pull away. Like Stroud was just trying to, give him some motivational advice. You're going to be a great player in this league, and he was sort of like he wanted to get out of there. Like didn't want to hear what Stroud had to say. And then I heard a report. I don't know how authentic it was, but there's rumblings from some NFL scouts that are, the Chicago Bears are starting to think that, just how he's handling himself in regards to that. Some have said in the organization, or they're starting to panic, Jaden Daniels would have been a better option in regards to that team. I don't know how true that is, Scott, but that's what I read yesterday. And again, I actually thought Jaden was the better quarterback out of both of them. They're both mobile. You saw what Jaden, did against elite competition. And granted, he was 9-3. I understand that. But he still put up a ton of points and a ton of yards against Alabama, Ole Miss, some of the better teams in the conference in the SEC. And when you realistically look at Caleb, when he faced off against Notre Dame, he really did look like a deer in the headlights last year. He threw 3 interceptions, didn't lead his team to a victory, didn't have that marquee win under his belt, didn't win a Pac-12 championship. I mean, this was supposed to be all of the accolades because of Caleb Williams, and he had the best talent in Southern Cal. So if you couldn't do it in college, who's to say he's going to do it in the NFL? And when you look at his Rookie of the Year price, plus 320 now behind Daniels and more importantly, Marvin Harrison, I would give the edge to both of those players before I would Caleb Williams.
Yeah, and I like Daniels, too, coming out of college. I thought he was the better of the 2 quarterbacks. So would they go so far as to bench him? If they were to lose,
Scotty,
I mean.
But here's the thing. Let me ask you this. Again, 8.5 win total to start the year. They're not saying you're a 5-win football team. So if this team, let's just say they lose this week, and let's just say they're 2-5, what do you do then?
Yeah, I would think, you got to bench him, right? I mean, if he's not playing well because they're 2-5 versus, he's playing well, but they're still 2-5. If he's not playing, if he's throwing for like 120 yards a game.
Right. If he's throwing for like 250 and 2 touchdowns and there's a hint of a passing attack, that's great. But if it looks like Justin Fields, 140 yards, no touchdowns, an interception, no rushing yards, what are you getting out of him?
Yeah. And you got talent on that team, right? Offensively, when you throw in a Dunze on top of everything else, Right. But it just goes to show how what C.J. Stroud did last year, Joe, is such an anomaly. That's not the norm. Quarterbacks just don't come in and be as good as that guy was, and apparently will be again this year. I mean, it's very, very difficult. So you got to go through the lumps, I guess, with Caleb Williams.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. Week number 3 is on the horizon tomorrow night. New York Jets and New England Patriots. For Scott Wetzel, our great producer, Danny Ohlers, I'm Lisi. We'll see you back tomorrow. for Football Full Circle. Have a great day, everyone.
Now you've done it.
You found the advantage for gaming, odds, and more. But we call it the winning edge for short. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.